My professional background was very much in the nonprofit, like community development world. And his background is very much in entrepreneurship and small business. And I think Buunni has managed to combine both. And all of our cafes are really sort of hubs for community gatherings, events, and it is really about community building through coffee.
That was Sarina Prabasi, co-owner of Buunni Coffee, and this is Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. I'm your host, Amber Castillo. Sarina Prabasi and her husband Elias started Buunni Coffee in 2012 after moving from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to New York City. With them, they brought a deep appreciation for the Ethiopian coffee culture, which emphasizes community, hospitality, and the experience of enjoying coffee together. Today, Buunni Coffee is exactly that, a hub for community gatherings and events, with 4 cafes in Washington Heights and Inwood. Today, I sit down with Sarina to learn more about how coffee played a crucial role in her and Elias's lives, from their first meeting over a cup of coffee in Ethiopia to the creation of Buunni Coffee in New York. She shares the challenges they faced as new entrepreneurs in New York City, the importance of sustainable and fair trade practices in their sourcing, and how Buunni Coffee has become an integral part of their community. Before we jump in, a quick message from our team.
Hi, I'm Mariana from the Epicenter NYC team. Did you know that anxiety, sleep problems, and muscle pain could be symptoms of long COVID? Take the steps needed to protect yourself, your family, and your plants. Get vaccinated against COVID-19. We can help you schedule your appointment and even arrange it right there. Email us at hello@epicenter-nyc.com or call or text us at 917-818-2690.
Now, back to the show. Here's my conversation with Sarina.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sarina Prabasi. I'm the co-founder of Buunni Coffee.
When did you start Buunni Coffee? Could you talk about what motivated you and how and when you started?
Yeah, my husband Elias and I moved from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia to New York City in 2011. And we moved into our neighborhood of Washington Heights, where we still are. In our life in Ethiopia, coffee played a huge role. There's a whole big culture of coffee and hospitality and coffee and community building in Ethiopia. And we were looking for, as we were making a new home for ourselves, we started with the name Buunni Coffee. We started with, like a lot of small businesses do, we started with like, what are we going to call it? What is it going to look like? And as luck would have it, a small space opened up around the corner from where we live. We opened our first cafe the following year in 2012, Cafe Buunni, which is on Pinehurst Avenue in Washington Heights.
And I read that you and Elias originally met also over coffee. Could you speak a little bit about that?
I'm originally from Nepal. I studied in the United States and I started working in Washington, D.C. for an international nonprofit. I was in Ethiopia for work. So I was working there. My office was in the neighborhood where Elias grew up. So we were introduced by a colleague and then we kept running into each other because it's where he lived. And I don't know who invited who for coffee, but that happened. And then we had a lot of coffee all over the city. We would try and meet for macchiato and talk and get to know each other. Coffee was a big part of us getting to know each other. And eventually we got married. Now we have 2 kids. So yeah, it all started with a coffee.
And could you speak about how your personal backgrounds for both of you influenced your decision to start a coffee business? I know it was just a big part of both of you growing up.
My professional background was very much in the nonprofit, like community development world. And his background is very much in entrepreneurship and small business. And I think Buunni has managed to combine both into a very community-minded small business. And so in our cafes have really become, now we have 4 cafes, all in Washington Heights and Inwood, so uptown New York. And all of our cafes are really sort of hubs for community gatherings, events, they're very much neighborhood spots where people get together. And it is really about community building through coffee.
What are your earliest memories of coffee? Were you always like a coffee aficionada?
Not at all. When I grew up in Nepal, for us, coffee was, Nescafe with lots of milk and sugar. So I do have early memories, but it was that. And it's a tea drinking culture, very much a tea drinking culture. And I feel like I really discovered like good quality coffee and started drinking black coffee when I moved to Ethiopia. And Elias's is very different. For him, it's his earliest memories of having coffee in his neighborhood with neighbors. He still talks about this elderly woman. The kids used to call her Mama Tsaga, and she would make the coffee. And his memory of coffee is very much around her and early childhood memories.
And besides that community aspect, which is very strong in your journey with coffee, could you speak about when you were living in Ethiopia and, surrounded by all this coffee, did you start to develop a kind of, I don't know if it's called a taste profile, or did you find yourself more able or more willing to pay attention to nuances in different coffees?
Yeah, I'd say, in Ethiopia, I started being able to drink the coffee black with nothing in it and really taste the coffee and appreciate it. And then I would say, really, it's when we started Buunni. And we were doing a lot of tastings of coffees from different regions. Even different regions of Ethiopia have very different flavor profiles. So our specialty coffees are mainly Ethiopian, though we also now have some specialty coffees from Dominican Republic. So now I can taste the difference between them, and I can tell a lot more about the coffees drinking them now than I was in the beginning. And it's been really fun. It's a learning experience, and you can really train your palate too as you start drinking coffee from different parts of the world, coffee also that's been processed in different ways, roasted in different ways. It all affects how in the end it tastes in your cup. And it's also very much individual preference. So we really are about, we want people to enjoy their coffee. And so the way I enjoy my coffee might be different than the way you enjoy your coffee. But the main thing is we want you to enjoy it.
And I read that you both also like to, play and invent to create different blends. How do you go about doing that? And could you give an example?
Yeah, like for example, our house blend, which is what we serve on drip at all of our cafes. That coffee is a combination of Ethiopian and always a Latin coffee. So Central American, South American coffee. It changes over the years. It's changed, but we try to maintain the same flavor profile. And the reason it works really well, we think, and it's a very popular with customers, is Ethiopian coffees tend to have this more fruity, floral, even spicy notes. And then the Latin and South American coffees tend to have more chocolatey, hazelnut, sort of deeper cocoa kind of taste. And when you combine the two, we found that it works really well. And we do like to make new blends. When we celebrated our 10th anniversary, we had a 10th anniversary blend that was sort of celebratory, I guess, seasonally as well. Sometimes, in the winter, you want something a little bit, maybe a bit with some warm spice notes, something that tastes maybe a little bit cinnamony or, with some winter spices. And then in the summer, you might want something a little bit more refreshing or a little bit more citrusy. So we make our own cold brew in the cafe, which is a way of making coffee that is served cold. And more people like their coffee iced, or they drink cold brew or iced coffee these days. And that's like a change in demographics of coffee drinkers. We also pay a lot of attention into how we make that cold brew so that it's also tasting good.
Yeah. Are there certain ways that you ensure that the quality of the Ethiopian coffee beans is preserved from farm to cup?
Yeah, and we started with Ethiopian coffee because that was an area that we were familiar with, where we had, trusted relationships, where we knew the farmers' cooperatives. And so we really started from there because we knew we could ensure the quality of the product. So every year we sample, of course, any farm, you can say this is a good farm or coffee from this region, from this farm historically has been good, but you taste it every year because it's in the end, it's an agricultural crop. And so the amount of rainfall makes a difference, how dry it was, how hot it was, and all of those things. Maybe we can talk about this later, but these are all things that are also kind of threatening the future of specialty coffee as weather patterns change and climate change. The areas that grow coffee are under a lot of climatic stress. So these patterns are changing. And obviously for smaller farmers, it's the hardest because they take on a lot of risk, which at the end of the year, at the end of the harvest, it might not taste the same. But anyway, the way to do it is really to sample and to taste, and then we choose which coffees we want. And we can't always carry all the coffees that we love. There's logistics and prices and a lot of different considerations, but we try our best to work with either cooperatives or, some form of purchasing that provides a fairer price to the farmer.
And these sustainability and fair labor practices that are obviously important to you both, when did that become something you thought about in terms of business? Like, I know you have like a nonprofit background. Was this something that you were thinking about for a while?
In the beginning, we only used to source from farmers cooperatives. And now we source not only from farmers cooperatives, but a lot of the coffees that we carry are organic. Some of them are not certified organic because for smaller farmers, it's an expense and it's sometimes unachievable to be certified organic, though we know what the farming practices are. So then there's a level of just understanding that, the smaller farms are also not usually able to afford expensive fertilizer and chemicals, and often they're using very natural like composting and other ways. But the benefit, I guess, of working with the larger cooperatives is that they are able to get certified. That's kind of two ways that we look at it. And I think coffee and tea, especially being organic, is really important. If you're buying from a large scale farm, like a big farm estate, then it's getting sprayed a lot. So buying from smaller farmers and checking those growing practices ends up with a much better product.
Did a lot of these relationships with other, maybe folks who know about coffee, did they spring up because just organically you guys talking about coffee with friends and then friends of friends, or how did a lot of that happen?
When we came to the US and started the business, I think it was very important for us to do our research and to try to start to build a network here because we didn't have that. And I think that is true of a lot of like new entrants into any industry. So we would go to coffee events. We would try to meet people there. We would try to learn as much. Elias took some coffee classes that were more towards like understanding what the US consumer wants, or how drinks are prepared in a cafe in New York is different than how drinks are prepared in a cafe in Addis Ababa. Though we do have some Ethiopian specialty drinks on our cafe menu. So there was a lot of research and learning involved in the first year. And then once we opened our first cafe, there was a lot of learning by doing and learning by making mistakes. And I think growing the network has really taken time because for a lot of small businesses like us, it's like 24/7, like especially when you're starting to build a business from scratch, so much of your time is involved in the operations, in the day-to-day. There's not that much time or bandwidth to like even lift your head up and look around and say, well, who else is doing what? It's a tough balance. So I think we did a lot of research, our most intensive research before we opened our first cafe. And then more recently, now that, we're a little bit more established with Buunni and it feels like a bit stable, our next step, which is we're opening a coffee roastery in the Bronx, in the South Bronx. And right now we roast our own coffee, but we use a shared facility in Brooklyn. And that's been wonderful, but it is very far from Washington Heights. And it's a half a day of travel, just travel without even roasting. So we are opening a roastery, fingers crossed, soon. And it will be in Hunts Point in the Bronx. That's kind of a next step in the business. And again, has required us to do a lot of learning and research and talking to other people who roast And now that we feel also a bit more confident in our own experience, I'd say, it's a very friendly and open community. And there are a lot of people who are willing to share and who are willing to share their other contacts and networks and things.
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that, like how you keep connected to, other communities as you're also connecting with your, community in Uptown.
So I think for both of us, our sort of countries of origin are like an important part of our identity, and the business more so with Ethiopia and New York. And so Elias, most of his family is, and almost entirely all of his family is in Ethiopia. So a couple of years ago, he went for a month just to kind of reconnect with family and friends. And also a couple of years ago, I took our kids and spent the summer in Nepal, like really to immerse them in our culture. And that's less about Buunni as a business, but more about us as a family. And I think that being a family business, sometimes we don't really know where the lines are between family and business. It's sort of interconnected. The other thing is, like, maybe something that I should have mentioned is when we were first moving to Washington Heights and opening Buunni, the business itself became such an important part of our family story of getting to know a new place and making a home for ourselves. So it was very much a mutual thing where people will still come and say, "Oh, thanks so much for opening this cafe." And for us, it was like, well, a wonderful way of getting to know a place and its people, and then also feeling part of it. And that's, I think, that reference to making a home for ourselves. And I think that Buunni has allowed us as a family to do that here, and to feel like, it's both, we are contributing to the community, but we're also gaining so much. And we're also really so, feel so thankful.
And then lastly, what does being a small business owner mean to you?
Wow, that's a good question. So having a small business for me is one of the things that really motivates me is there's a kind of freedom associated with it, which I really enjoy. Like, I've worked for many years in organizations and larger organizations as well. And as wonderful as it was, there's something really great about not having so much bureaucracy and just being able to be like, okay, this is a good idea, let's do it. Oh, this is a bad idea, let's stop doing it. It's like very quick. You can make decisions quickly. And I think that is something. And also it can be quite creative because you have to wear multiple hats at the same time. So you can't be like super specialized and be like, oh, I'm only going to work on this very specific technical thing that I'm good at, because the business will require you to do a lot of different things. And in a way, it keeps the day-to-day varied. It keeps it exciting. It keeps it's not boring, like every day can be quite different. And in the community, I think for us, I touched on it a little bit before. I think it really has, being a small business owner in Washington Heights has really allowed us to be part of the community in a way that if we had just moved here, and maybe we wouldn't have like sort of this sort of depth of relationship with the neighborhoods in different ways, like, and being a family business that actually lives where your business is, right? So our kids go to school in the neighborhood, they're starting from daycare. Like, there are all these different ways that we interact with the community, including with other small businesses, our literal neighbors, like people who live in our building that I see in the coffee shop.
To learn more about Buunni Coffee, visit buunnicoffee.com. You can order their premium coffee sourced from small Ethiopian farms online or by stopping by one of their locations in Uptown Manhattan. Finally, if you know of a local business that you think Epicenter should feature, let us know. Drop us a note at hello@epicenter-nyc.com. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com. Our intro music is All the Pretty Horses by Karavika. You can find more of their music on their website, linked to in our podcast description.